by Jesus, being himself Jewish. Obviously, he partook himself of this Paschal sacrifice and was at one of these dinners, these seders on Passover Eve. The prophets saw that the Jews would be returned on the wings of eagles to Israel. Now, today, we understand what that means. That means an airplane. He had no lexicon. He has no vocabulary to say airplane. So the way he saw it in his vision was wings of eagles. That's the best he could come up with at the time with his understanding of how the world worked.
So you can't like give a bank transfer to the temple, I don't think, or paper shekels or paper dollars. You have to give actual gold and silver. Am I right on that, or is that going too far?
I believe you're 100% right on that. That Israel is compared to a huge hurricane. And people looking from the outside at this hurricane are going to say that is the most dangerous place to be. But those that are inside Israel, those that are inside the eye of the storm, is completely calm.
Hey guys, Rafi from the Endgame Investor, and as a Pesach Passover special, we are talking to Rabbi Josh Wander, currently serving in the Israeli army. You can see he's wearing his uniform. He's on duty right now, regarding the war, obviously. And his Substack is Geula Movement, and there will be a link in the description below. He has some ideas regarding the third temple, or maybe the rebuilding of the second temple. There's some argument about whether we're going to be rebuilding the second one or building the third one, depending on how you see the thing. A Catholic cardinal was prevented from going into the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. I think it was 2 days ago. There was a big ruckus, and then Netanyahu himself intervened and allowed the Catholics to pray in their church. And I don't have a big problem with that inherently. I think that's not such a bad thing. But if they can pray in their church, why can't we pray on our Temple Mount? Obviously, we can't because of the same situation. So, what is this with this preferential treatment of Catholics in our own country?
So first of all, Rafi, thank you for having me on. And I'm although I'm in the army, I'm not anything I'm saying is my own thoughts, and I'm not representing the IDF or the Ministry of Defense. What I can tell you is that we're living in an incredible historic time. And we are seeing things unfold before our eyes that have been mentioned 2,000 years ago in the Bible. The prophets have mentioned this occurring, and we're fortunate enough to be witnessing these things happening today. And one of those things that we're seeing today, which is unprecedented in the past decades that we have been sovereign on the Temple Mount, is that the Temple Mount has been completely sealed. It's been closed up to, and even during what they call the holy month of Ramadan, where hundreds of thousands of Muslims usually come to pray on the Temple Mount, it was completely empty this year, sealed by the Israeli police. And that gives us a unique opportunity because since the Temple Mount is completely empty, it is an opportunity for us to be able to bring the Paschal sacrifice in its proper time, in its proper place. And that can only be done in one place, and that is on the Temple Mount. It does not involve removing any of the current structures that are up there, or damaging or changing any of the status quo that's there. In fact, it could be done over a few hours on the eve of Passover without anyone even knowing it happened. And for us, for the Jewish people, it is incredibly important commandment in our Torah. And it is something that we have been waiting to start this process again for 2,000 years. Every year on Passover, Jews around the globe sit down at their meals on Passover night, their Seder, and they speak about this three different aspects of the Seder. And the first one is called Pesach, is called Passover, which actually refers to this sacrifice. And the end of the Seder is meant to be sitting down, what we call today the Afikoman stage, the last stage, which has been replaced with a matzah. But in days of old, it was the actual lamb of the Paschal sacrifice that was eaten for dessert during the Seder meal. And that, by the way, for those Christians that are watching out there, was the famous Last Supper that was done by Jesus, being himself Jewish. Obviously, he partook himself of this Paschal sacrifice and was at one of these dinners, these seders on Passover Eve. Well, just to clarify, the temple is not a requirement for the Paschal sacrifice that we were speaking about earlier. The Paschal sacrifice is something that can be brought even without a temple. This is something that's not well known, even amongst religious Jews, that it is absolutely okay to bring sacrifices. In fact, that was done in the Bible, in the book of Ezra. That was done when the Jews came back from Babylon. They started to bring sacrifices before the temple was actually built. So that is not a requirement that stops us from bringing the sacrifices and eating them on the eve on Passover night.
Yeah. That's.
Um,
I just wanted to interject here. I find it kind of disturbing and a little bit sad that so many Jews believe that the temple will fall from the sky or it'll be some miraculous occurrence, and that we are not going to come back to Israel before the temple is rebuilt, or some of the anti-Zionist sects like Satmar, and though they are our brothers, I think they are very incorrect on this. Because the very simple pshat, especially in the book of Yechezkel and the book of Ezekiel, is that we come back to Israel before the Messianic era. It's in chapter 38, chapter 39 of Ezekiel, straight out. And we have very simple, very obvious biblical sources that sacrifices are offered before the building is built. As you said, in Ezra and Nehemiah, but that it's become some kind of a sub-religion that people believe that we can't do anything until Mashiach comes or Messiah comes and magically just like airlifts us all to Israel, and the building drops from heaven. I think this is very infantile thinking, and I think we've got to really get rid of it. There's very, very few sources, very weak sources for a temple dropping from the sky.
I would disagree with you. I wouldn't say they're weak sources. The most famous of the medieval commentators on the Talmud, Rashi and Tosafot, both mentioned that such a concept could happen. But you have to understand the context in which they're writing this. They're writing this when the Talmud is having a discussion as to how it would be possible that there was not a temple on the eve of a holiday, and then all of a sudden we're able to start doing all of the services in the temple. And their conclusion is that the only way that a temple could miraculously be built in one day is that it would fall from the sky.
Well,
There are
yeah,
other
yeah.
sources also.
I'm aware of that source, and I'm aware of the context too. But that's what I mean when I say weak sources, because as we both know, the Gemara, the Talmud, exhausts all logical possibilities in trying to make sense of the sources that came before it. So that's one of the ways that they're trying to exhaust the logical possibility by saying, oh, well, it's theoretically possible that it could fall from heaven, but that's not. I don't think that's a practical shita in terms of this is a historical possibility. We have to wait for it. I think it's just something that they were saying to exhaust all logical possibilities in an argument that they were trying to straighten out. That's all.
So I believe that there are two aspects to the temple. One is a physical construction, that one of the 613 commandments that is given to us, the Asu Mikdash, that we are obligated as Jews in every generation to build the temple, a physical construction of the temple, is a commandment that we have to build that physical construction. But there is also an aspect of a spirituality of God's presence that is going to come down from the heavens. So I don't see this necessarily as a contradiction. I think that there is an aspect of us building it, and there is also an aspect of something coming down from the heavens. There are some rabbis that suggest that if we merit it, then we will build it ourselves, and if we don't merit it, then it'll have to come down from the heavens. The truth is that any believer in the Bible, in the prophets, around the world, that it also is a believer in what you call the end game, understands that at some point this is going to happen. It's just a question of how it's going to happen, and that's it's up for us to do whatever we can. We actually learn an important lesson from King David. King David wanted to build a temple, and he was famously told by the prophet that since he was a warrior and he had blood on his hands, he would not be able to build the temple because the temple is a house of peace and he was a warrior. So his son Solomon would be the one that would build the temple. So at that point, he was a busy king. He could have said, I have a lot on my agenda. God just told me that I'm not going to be building the temple. I can scratch that off my agenda and I can move on to other things. But he didn't do that. He continued to do whatever was in his power to build the infrastructure of the temple and to leave the rest for his son Solomon. So we learn from this an important lesson that we are obligated to do whatever is in our hands, whatever is in our power to do. Perhaps we can't go right now with a hammer and nail up to the Temple Mount and start building the temple. But if we can start building the infrastructure and start preparing everything that needs to be prepared, that is definitely a sign to God and to us that we are doing the right thing. As far as the sects that say otherwise, it is a convenient excuse for many people to stay in exile because they say that we're waiting for this magical time. In fact, I have coined what I have coined as the MMM. I tell people that inevitably, if you studied in a religious institution abroad, you were taught this concept of the MMM, which is the magical Mashiach moment. You're taught that the Messiah is meant to appear out of the blue, that the temple is going to fall down from the sky. Everybody's going to be transported on the wings of eagles to Israel. And this is all happening. And I've written articles about this, how many religious Jews are waiting for a Disney character to come and save them. Clearly, this is not the way that God planned it. And we are watching unfold before our eyes this redemptive process in which there is an ingathering of the exiles of millions of Jews. I believe the majority of the Jews today that have come back to the land of Israel and more joining all the time. And we're watching historic things play out that perhaps could not even be understood. I wrote an article about this recently on my Substack. The idea that a prophet was given a certain vision, a certain image, and he saw certain things. So, for example, the prophet saw that the Jews would be returned on the wings of eagles to Israel. Now, today we understand what that means. That means an airplane. He had no lexicon. He has no vocabulary to say airplane. So the way he saw it in his vision was wings of eagles. That's the best he could come up with at the time with his understanding of how the world worked. Likewise, there are many different things that we see in the prophecies that could not be understood throughout the generations until our generation, until today, that we're watching these things and we can understand what they mean because they were just completely could not be explained in previous generations. So we're fortunate enough to be in a generation where we're watching this happen and watching this unfold. And there are sects, like you said, that are out there. I don't necessarily believe the Satmar is completely. There's been a change. This is going off topic, but there's been a change in the Satmar community. And today, the Satmar community is building like crazy in Israel, in the neighborhood of Geula, inside of Jerusalem, in Bnei Brak, and closer to Tel Aviv. They're building these huge buildings. There's lots of Satmar Hasidim that are coming to Israel. So although in theory they are against the creation of the state, you see that they're all jumping on board. There's a fringe element that is known as Neturei Karta, that they go out and they dress up and they call themselves rabbis and go meet with our enemies, the enemies of the Jewish people in Iran and in Hamas and all these other people. But they're really nutcases. They get a lot of PR because people like seeing rabbis join our enemies, but they really a very, very small fringe element of the Jewish world.
And on that thought, and then I wanted to get into the your ideas on Kesef and Shaveh Kesef and money in the temple. So on that thought, there's a lot of people that I was fans of during the COVID times and before for their libertarian leanings that have now come out and said things like Zionism and Judaism are not the same and they're incompatible because there's nothing in Judaism that says the Jews have to have a state. And I just wanted to clear that up for people that it's true that in Gullah's Judaism, in exile-minded Judaism, which has been developing for the past 2,000 years of exile, there is no idea of a Jewish state because we've been in exile. However, the entire Tanakh, the entire Old Testament, as Christians call it, the entire Bible, from cover to cover, almost, well, from Abraham to the other and from Abraham to the end is about how a specific people live in a specific land and do a specific thing in that specific land. So when we're done with exile Judaism, we are uniting our politics with our religion and we're making it one again. There's no separation of church and state in Judaism. That's a Christian idea, or it's not a Christian idea. It's an American idea to separate Christianity from the state because you don't want those two interfering, which shows you that there is kind of a problem with Christianity if it can't help operate a state being fully integrated, then there's a problem with the system. But Judaism is supposed to be state religion, and this is the state of the Jews, just as America is the state of the Americans, and our Constitution is the Torah, just like the American Constitution is a document that was written in the 1780s by James Madison, among others. So our Torah was written by Moses, word for word from God, and that's our Constitution. So we're trying to reactivate it, and we will. What are your ideas on the temple and money, and where are we now on that regard?
So it's interesting. The idea in the Torah of kesef, which is the Hebrew word for both for silver and for money, there's a differentiation between what is known as kesef, which is a currency, and shava kesef, which is the actual silver bullion. So, for example, throughout in order to give certain to redeem certain tithes, there were certain tithes that can only be eaten within Jerusalem. And if you weren't able to bring, let's say you had a flock of sheep and you weren't able to bring your sheep to Jerusalem, so you can redeem them onto coins, onto money, and then you can bring those coins to Jerusalem and spend those coins in Jerusalem. That was called the redeeming of the tithes. So things like that, you had to use not only silver, but you had to use sovereign silver, something that was recognized by a government. And you correctly said offline that there were times when before they were minting actual coinage, and during those times it was recognized, the actual bullion was recognized as sovereign coins. And we see that going back all the way from Abraham, who purchased the tomb of the patriarchs from Ephron in Hebron with 400 silver coins. Those coins were not sovereign coins, but they were silver. There was bullion, but that was considered to be the medium of exchange at the time. So we have to use the medium. It's actually interesting that you just mentioned this, because we just mentioned the Ture Karta, and there are those people, including my rabbi, who jokes around that the Ture Karta here in Israel continues to redeem on coins, on Israeli coins, on shekels. And if they don't believe that the state of Israel is legitimate and it's a real state, then that's a real problem in Jewish law. They really shouldn't be redeeming on coins that are not really considered coins, because the state is not a legitimate state. Of course, they don't really think it through when they're what they're doing. So they continue to do that. But there is this idea, and of course, there are communal sacrifices that have to be brought in the temple. Those communal sacrifices are funded by a fund that is, every Jew is obligated once a year to give a half a shekel, which is a silver equivalent of money, to the temple for communal sacrifices, and that is all collected and that's used throughout the year for all the temple services. So we hope to see this happen today. This is something that is being worked on. There are even people that are working on crypto versions of this, although I don't know much about it. But it's interesting to see that, again, these things that were lost over 2,000 years of exile are coming back alive.
One pasuk that I refer to a lot in some of my Patreon videos where I teach economic and monetary lessons is Vitzarta Kesef Be'adecha, that when you're Mechol Alamos, when you sell your sheep for silver, and then you use the silver to go to Jerusalem and then buy sheep there to give to the temple, it says you have to wrap the silver in your hand, or wrap the money in your hand, however you want to translate it. And that leads me to the idea that there are no derivatives in the temple. There's no derivative meat, there's no derivative money. Everything is real. There's real musical instruments. There's real meat, not fake meat. There's real money. So you can't like give a bank transfer to the temple, I don't think, or paper shekels or paper dollars. You have to give actual gold and silver. Am I right on that, or is that going too far?
I believe you're 100% right on that. There was an interesting discussion I was speaking to my rabbi about years ago, when crypto just began, and we were discussing the whole concept of crypto, and he was very disturbed by the idea of crypto because he said that makes the whole many different processes that go on in the Jewish religion. It makes them void if you don't have the actual physical money. So, and he mentioned that there was a question of a ketubah. A ketubah is a legal document when someone gets married. A Jewish person gets married. One is obligated. A groom is obligated to give to his bride a legal document stating that if they were to get divorced, he has to give her a certain amount of money, and that money is usually given in silver. That's how it's denominated, or the equivalent thereof.
Yeah,
So,
200 zuz and kesef tzaruf, right?
right. So what's interesting is that there was somebody early on in the crypto world that decided that he's going to get married, and he's going to write the number not in zuzim, not in silver coins, but in crypto and Bitcoin, whatever it was. So that was early on in the game, and the Bitcoin was relatively worthless. And then all of a
So
sudden,
what,
it
he owes
shot up.
billions of dollars to his wife
And
and
he
he gets a
went
divorce?
exactly what happened. So he was going to get divorced,
Oh my God.
and the wife is claiming that you said you're giving me a million Bitcoin. I want my money, and he's saying no, I was giving you the equivalent of that at the time, not what it's worth today. So there was a whole discussion amongst the rabbis what should be done with this ketubah.
Oh man. Wow. Okay. So my last question before you go is, how is the war going? Are we winning? Are we losing? Is it ending soon? Are we going to take Lebanon or just retreat again? So we have to do this all again in the next few years.
I'm not privy to any of that information, but I can tell you that we're living in I would call it biblical times. We're living in what we're seeing now is what was prophesied thousands of years ago, that there would be a war that would ultimately be the final war between Paras, which is Persia, today's Iran, and the Jewish people. That what is mentioned in the Midrash as Arabia, which is probably Saudi Arabia or the Arab countries, would also be involved in this war, this great world war, and they would run off because they would get scared at some point that Iran is winning and they're going to destroy the world. They would run off to Edom, which seems to be America, to Rome or to America, and they would start saying, "What are we going to do?" Everybody's running around in fear. This is written thousands of years ago. Everybody's running around in fear.
Wait, what
And
source is this? Do you remember?
the Yalkut Shimoni. I can send it to you.
Okay.
And Omar Rabbi Yitzchak it starts.
Uh-huh.
So it says over there that at that point the Jews are also going to be running from place to place, and they're going to be scared, and they're not going to know what to do because they're about to be annihilated. Israel's about to be wiped out, and God, it comes down to them. A heavenly voice comes down to them and says, "Bonai, my children, why are you scared?" And he writes that Kol ma sha'asiti b'shvilchem asiti. Everything that I did for you. This whole thing has been organized in order to allow the redemptive process to play out. So there's no reason for us to fear. There is another source that I heard once that says that Israel is compared to a huge hurricane. And people looking from the outside at this hurricane are going to say that is the most dangerous place to be. But those that are inside Israel, those that are inside the eye of the storm, is completely calm. So, we see today and I've witnessed this over and over again. I witnessed this back in the first Gulf War, as the Scuds were coming from Iraq. I witnessed this over multiple times that until today, there are many people around the world that are seeing every time a missile comes from Iran, they have these pictures of where the missile may land. So it has like dozens of these little red dots, and it's constantly happening. And people, I know, friends of mine and family of mine in America, they look at this and they say, "Oh, Israel is so dangerous. There's thousands of missiles that are coming down, barrages of missiles constantly, day and night, 24 hours a day, and everybody's stuck in their shelters," because that's the videos you see of people in their shelters. and they don't realize that there's life that goes on beyond that, and people are living normal lives, and people are walking around like normal. There's no craziness. In fact, as a response to some news broadcaster that said there are riots in the streets here in Israel and how terrible it is, I wrote a satiric post on my Substack describing how there's a rush to all the supermarkets right now because it's on the eve of the holiday, and there's always a rush to all the supermarkets, and everybody's buying, and there's this conspiracy because the Jews around the world are looking for specific products that say OUP, which P stands for Passover. But I wrote that they're speculating, analysts are speculating it might mean that is preparedness or priority, and the Jews were all stocking up for the end game, the war of Gog and Magog, the apocalypse. By the way, the word apocalypse, if you look at the root of the word apocalypse, is very interesting. It comes from a Greek word, and it means to reveal. It's the ultimate revelation that's going to happen. It's not something that's necessarily bad. It's something that leads to something that's very good. And the temple itself is going full circle. The temple, the Torah says, Ki beiti beit tefillah yikarei lechol hamim. It is meant to be a house that is going to be a house for all of the nations. It's not just for the Jewish people, it's for all of the world. And it's going to be a house of peace, and it's going to bring peace to the world. So we hope that this year will be that year where we see the fruition of all of these prophecies. If it doesn't happen this year, it'll happen next year. We've been doing this for thousands of years. So it's not a question of if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen. But we're definitely watching the end game come to reality.
Yeah. All right. Chag Sameach, and have fun in the army.
Thank you.
Okay.
Be well.
Bye.